and Mike is in the studio now.
Here we go.
Welcome, Mike. How you doing?
Hi guys, thanks for having me. I'm doing good. How's your Friday going?
Oh, it's great. How's yours?
Quite excellent. Spent a lot of time with the research team.
Oh, awesome. Can you give us just a brief introduction, your background, and then how you wound up working on ArcPrize and kind of what you're excited to announce most recently?
Yeah, so I'm I guess probably best known for co-founding Zapier about
Yeah.
15 years ago, an automation company. That's what I've been working on the last 13 plus years. And I had sort of like call me AI curious. I went sort of all in on AI early January 2022 when the Chain of Thought paper first came out.
Mm-hmm.
All these like LM reasoning benchmarks were sort of like spiking up in performance, and it got me really curious. Like, are we on path for AGI or not? And this ended up leading to Zapier deploying, I think, a lot of AI products really early into the market.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this trend I had seen and heard. I spent, probably hundreds of hours talking with customers around, deploying AI agents. Zapier's been deploying them for a couple of years now. And the feedback was always consistent. Like, hey, I get the hype, but like they're not reliable enough yet. They don't work 2 out of 10 times, and that just doesn't work for these unsupervised automation products. And this was sort of in contrast to all this like AGI hype, right, that I see on Twitter all day long.
Yep.
Same thing I'm sure you guys saw, in the 2023, 2024 era. And so I tried to set out to figure out how do I like explain this? Because like I have two sets of lived experience that sort of don't match. And this is how I rediscovered Francois Chalet's ARC benchmark that was originally published in 2019.
Wow.
And I sort of expected to have gotten kind of beaten by this point, first looking into probably, again, 2023, 2024. Surprised that it basically hadn't, and not only hadn't been beaten, there'd basically been no progress on it, which I thought was really fascinating given the fact that we've like scaled up these language model systems by almost like 50,000 times over the last 3-4 years prior. And so that was kind of the genesis of me leading to meeting Francois and kind of pitching with this idea of like, hey, I think this is literally the most important unbeaten AI benchmark in the world. I think it makes a really important statement that like pre-training scaling alone is not sufficient to get to AGI. And more people should know about this fact. And so we launched ArcPrize together to try to sort of raise awareness of the benchmark and just honestly inspire more people to work on new ideas again towards AGI.
Can you talk about a little bit about the prize money and then what happened with ArcPrize 1 and then what's happening now with the second iteration?
Yeah. So when we launched last year, like I said, there's been very little progress towards, I think GPT-4o was scoring 4% on the benchmark.
Yeah,
That's
really
4 years in, 5 years in.
And again, like an 8-year-old should be able to do these. It's
especially
pretty
ARC-AGI 1. It was it turned out to be, in retrospect, quite simple. It's a very binary sort of fluid intelligence test.
Yeah.
All the knowledge you need to solve this benchmark are doable by you acquire the knowledge very early on in childhood development.
Sure.
You can take the tasks, in fact, yourself. If you go to arcprize.org, we have a big player. I think what's special about ARC is that it is the sort of design concept of it is it targets something that's quite straightforward and easy and simple for humans, but hard for AI. And this is in contrast to every other AI benchmark that exists today, which are trying to like challenge this like PhD plus frontier, like frontier math or humanities last exam. These are sort of AI benchmarks that you really do need to be like PhD level plus to be able to even solve as a human. And in contrast, ARC makes a very different claim that, hey, there's still a lot of like very straightforward for human capability that these frontier AI systems don't have. And so that's why we launched ArcPrize during the contest. I think one of the things ArcPrize 2024 will be noted for is probably the introduction of this like test time adaptation method. That was some of the papers that came out from the contest. We had a big $1 million prize in order to beat the benchmark to get to 85%. No one did. You also have to do it with a very high degree of efficiency. And we kind of expected that was going to be the case. So we also had this paper track where people could submit new ideas and push the conceptual forward for us, which is where most of the coolest progress came out from last year. And then at the end of the year, obviously last fall, we started seeing things like O1 and O3. And this is a very big update, I think, because systems like O1, particularly O1 Pro and things like O3, are not just purely scaling up language models. These are not language models anymore. These are really AI systems. They have a big model as a component of the system, but they have some sort of synthesis engine on top that allows them to like reuse their existing pre-training knowledge at test time to recombine the knowledge. And that allows them to make significant progress towards ARC. And we saw O3 in December, score a pretty high degree of efficiency, solve ARC AGI. It's 75%, so not quite at the 85%. And then, OpenAI tested an even higher compute version of it that probably was a couple $1 million to test. They got 87%, I think.
It's crazy.
And so that was kind of where we wrapped up last year. We've been hard at work over the couple of years
Just
actually
real
working on
quickly,
this.
while you were
Oh,
saying that,
go ahead.
fantastic setting the table. I went to arcprize.org/play. I did the daily puzzle. I still got it. I'm still got a
Nice.
job. You can do it at home if you want. arcprize.org/play.
Do you think, with all the billions of dollars flowing around the ecosystem, do you think ArcPrize is capital constrained in any way? Like, would we have seen, better results to date, or is this sort of social status of just like, achieving?
Is this kind of like scaling? Are we compute bound here, or is it algorithm bound?
Right now, I think Arc AGI 2 that we just introduced this week on Monday is pretty direct evidence that we need new ideas still to get to AGI. We shared, I don't know if we can throw it up or we can put it in the show notes or something.
Sure.
There's a chart I shared on Twitter that shows the scaling performance of even frontier AI systems like O1 Pro and O3 against the version 1 of the data set that we've been using for the last 5 years, and then version 2 that we just introduced this week. And basically, it resets the baseline back to 0%. Language models, pure LLM systems are scoring like 0% now. Again, on ArcV2, single COT systems like R1 and O1 score like 1%. And the sort of estimates we have right now for the frontier systems that are actually adding pretty sophisticated, synthesis engines on top, like O1 Pro and O3, single-digit percentages on their efficient compute settings. So I think there's a very interesting point that like, we kind of moved from this regime where people were claiming, oh, we're just going to scale up language models, right? More data, more parameters, we're going to AGI. And people realize, I think that's not quite the story now. And then there's a new story that's emerged over the last like 5 months, which is, oh, we're going to scale up this test time compute, and that's going to get us to AGI. And I think what V2 shows is that that's not quite either. We still need some structural new ideas in order to like get to a regime where we can scale up to actually reach human performance on this stuff.
Do you think, like with how much human capital is sort of concentrated in San Francisco, like, do you think that is in the sort of like geographic concentration of so many of the brightest minds in AI is sort of like potentially even holding back like new random ideas, and that's why Arc can potentially sort of, if we need new ideas, like maybe they don't come from the sort of the center of the AI universe, and maybe they come from some random kid on the internet who's just like has the time to think completely independently and
this
and
feels
try to
kind
crack
of
this.
scrolls adjacent.
Yeah, exactly.
You put this idea out, and a bunch of people can take wild swings at it, and you get just new idea generation.
I got to say thank you to Net Freedom. You talk about the Vesuvius challenge.
Of course.
Literally, I was very inspired by what they were able to accomplish, and that was one of the motivations for actually running the prize in the way we did. I think, yes, part of the goal of running our prize was specifically to try and reach independent researchers and teams and like give them a problem to work on that they could actually make meaningful frontier progress on, right? I think especially in academia in the last maybe 5 years, there's been this disheartening belief of like, hey, can we really advance the frontier? Because like you have to have this billions of dollars in funding to scale up these language models. And I think ARC shows that like, yeah, there actually are frontier problems that are unsolved that individual people and individual teams can actually make a difference on today. That part of our whole goal of launching ArcPrize was re-inspire a lot of independent researchers to work on things like this and bring new ideas to the fold.
I remember when ChatGPT got a computer and it was able to write some Python code, then execute it. Are there restrictions on kind of custom systems that are LLM or reasoning model driven, but fine-tuned to help with the execution of Arc prizes? Is that breaking the rules, or is that something that is actually encouraged and fine? How do you think about, like, I guess it all boils down to like overfitting on this problem, but it seems like even with the incentive to overfit, it hasn't really happened yet.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons Arc V1 lasted 5 years, was because it had very good original design built into it with a public test set and a private test set.
Sure.
And that private test set really prevented folks from being able to sort of overfit on it. So there's actually 2 tracks for the Arc Prize Foundation. We have the contest track. This is on Kaggle. This is the like big grand prize. Yep. All the prize money is attached to this. Kaggle graciously donates a lot of compute to allow us to host there. And on the grand prize is basically to get to that 85% within Kaggle's efficiency limits. So this is get about $50 worth of compute per submission that you send in. This is like a pretty high bar for efficiency. And in fact, this is not an arbitrary bar. We do think that efficiency actually is a really, really important aspect of intelligence.
Totally.
You know, you can brute force your way up to intelligence, but we really do want to be shooting for like human targets and efficiency for this stuff.
Yep.
That's the contest. When we launched last year, there was a lot of demand from just the community of the world on like, hey, I get that like I can't run my big language model on this, you know, in Kaggle, but I really want to know how do frontier AI systems do. And so we launched a second track that's hosted on arcprize.org, where we benchmark and test all the like frontier commercial systems to showcase what are they, you know, capable of doing. Basically, these existence proofs that I think will eventually, you know, filter down to higher efficiency solutions and open source solutions that can be run on something like Kaggle. And even there, like within this sort of same efficiency and you know, accuracy specs, we still haven't seen any frontier AI system beat ArcAGI 2, let alone ArcAGI 1.
Yeah.
So there's still a long way to go.
What does that track actually look like? Does that mean that like the team from OpenAI is writing the specific prompt? Are they doing prompt engineering, or is it your team is just taking the API and giving everyone kind of the same goal? Is there any standardization there?
There is. ArcPrice does most of the testing today ourselves. Like we basically we wait for API access, either get early access or wait for the public access. And we have a GitHub repo where we just have a standard, very simple prompt that we use to baseline across all the sort of frontier systems that we test. OpenAI situation was a little different because they had reached out to us and said, hey, we think we've got a really impressive result on the public eval set, and we'd like your help to verify on the semi-private set, which is what we created that data set to be able to do. And in that case, there was really, you know, very little prompt engineering at all. It was mostly just a verification of what we'd seen from them. So yeah, in all these cases, the amount of prompting that goes into these is extremely minimal. We're basically just giving it the sort of grid with numbers and asking it to solve, and it directly goes into it.
Very cool.
Can you talk about consumer AI agents we've talked about on this show? Like, it feels like, you know, once a week, someone comes out and says they're building the consumer AI agent that's going to like book you a hotel or book you a flight or like do these things that sound really simple. And then like nobody's delivered, to our knowledge, like a truly magic agentic consumer experience to book a flight. Even, you know, you could use like OpenAI's operator to do this, but like even when you're sort of watching operator work, it's like, it feels like you're using, it doesn't feel like truly magic yet. And just, you know, given like it in many ways, like Zapier is just like such a foundational company when it comes to automating anything on the internet. I remember that was magic to me as a kid, where I was like, oh, data, you know, not a kid, I'd say like in like college, right? It's like, wait, data came in here and then it just went and did this other thing, or
that's
like amazing. I did this one thing.
Yeah, it feels like a superpower, right? Like,
totally.
And so in many ways, it's like criminally like underrated in terms of getting to that sort of like, you know, agentic internet. But like, why haven't people been able to like, I even saw like Perplexity like was saying last week, like we're building, you know, consumer agents that's going to like book your flight. So like, and Apple's promised this and everybody's promised it, but we haven't seen that magic experience yet. And I'm curious why you think that is.
We've been trying to deploy agents for 2 years at Zapier. And this was kind of what led me to sort of originally get interested in Arc is, you know, it's this reliability problem. Language models fundamentally are stochastic in terms of how they work. And so you're just never going to get that 100% accuracy directly from the model without adding a lot of extra additional guardrails, source like processing on top. We've done some of that for Zapier. The way that I kind of think about it, you got these concentric rings of use cases that kind of get unlocked as reliability and consistency goes up. And today we're pretty much still and this is true at the frontier, we're pretty much still in the kind of concentric ring of like personal productivity and team-based automation, where the risk to failure isn't very high. Right? Like if you're going to start deploying one of these like completely unsupervised agents into the wild, you're going to have a pretty high bar, right? If there's a sort of high degree of risk if this thing goes wrong, you know, I'll burn customer trust or brand trust or something like that. So that's what we've been kind of seeing is companies and users sort of slowly increasing those concentric rings as the technology is improving. I actually think we're going to start to see agents start to work this year, specifically because of progress in Arc. I think this is an underappreciated fact. Like people always ask, like, hey, don't Arc looks like puzzles? Like, what's the economic utility of this stuff? One of the most important things that Arc tests for is your ability to adapt to problems you haven't seen before. That's really the spirit and the essence of what it is. It's saying, hey, can you solve problems you didn't just memorize, but you actually have used knowledge you did memorize to like solve new things that you've never seen before. This is fundamentally the same aspect, like thing we're testing for in terms of generalization or reliability with agents. So I think because we're starting to see AI reasoning systems that are able to make progress against ArcAGI-1, albeit relatively inefficiently. But the capability is sort of now existing. There are AI systems out there that exist some degree of fluid intelligence. That's going to start increasing the reliability, and more of those concentric rings are going to get unlocked, I think, starting this year.
I want to talk about just like AI, AGI, ASI metrics. I feel like ArcPrize is a fantastically important benchmark. I agree with you on that. Ray Kurzweil has been benchmarking against just like flops to human flops, basically. He's put the singularity at 2045. He kind of nailed the Turing test date, I believe. But I've been kicking around this idea of like maybe the real test of like AI hitting some sort of like tipping point is just like how much economic value is being created by AI. And once that hits some sort of like 10% of total global GDP or 50%, then we've reached the AI singularity or something. Are there any metrics that you're looking at for kind of this like intelligence explosion, ASI, AGI, but outside of like an individual moment or application use case benchmark, something more global and like human relevant?
Pragmatically, I think the definition that I use for AGI these days is basically when we stop being able to easily find tasks that humans can do that AI can't do, we've got AGI. I think that's, like I said, a bit of a pragmatic answer. One of the things that surprised me about ArcAGI-2 was the relative degree of ease by which we were able to create it. Right. Given this like big moment in December of like O3 beating ArcAGI-1, it was actually not too hard for us to come up with tasks that we were able to sort of verify. We actually did a controlled human study to make sure every task in the V2 data set was solvable by at least 2 humans on the same rule set. And we were able to find that relatively easily. So I think that shows we still have ways to go. I think once we hit that bar, though, when the gap between like easy for humans, hard for AI is 0, I think it would be extremely difficult for anyone to like argue the opposite side that like we don't have AGI. I don't find the economic like measurements quite as useful for understanding the capabilities of what frontier AI does. I think it's a good measure of impact, and I have no problems using it for that point. But I think if you want to use like an economic measure to make a statement about capabilities, the challenge is it obscures, and there's multiple ways to get to that outcome. And this is one of the challenges with like language models. Like language models generally work in like a memorization style regime where they're learning lots of data. They're able to apply it to very similar types of patterns that they've seen before, but not novel patterns. That's what ArcAGI shows. And like those have economic utility. It turns out that like intelligence that's just memorizing actually does interesting things for us. Zapier is making money with the current regime of AI today. And so I think if you really want to like understand capabilities of frontier AI systems to make predictions based on the capabilities, you need more precise, narrow like wedges on that capability. And that's really what ArcAGI tries to be, is this wedge on, do these AI systems have the ability to actually adapt to problems that they haven't seen before and acquire skills, rapidly and efficiently to apply to new things that haven't been done before.
A little more fun question. What was your reaction to this week's sort of Ghibli moment? It felt like we talked about this on the show earlier,
Sputnik moment.
The funny thing for me is like, so we had a couple posts each that sort of like broke containment out of like traditional like teapot or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people quoting
like normies. People
quoting our post being like, all right, the jig is up. Like, what filter app did you use for this? So like, there's still people out there that like, are just like completely unaware of like progress. But like for those that sort of use these tools every day, it felt like this magic moment where people are just one-shotting these sort of image generation models and getting these sort of incredible outputs. But and yeah, it just felt
and one they're very excited about. Like, I guess my question to you guys is, do you think that the degree by which we saw like the Ghibliization of like Twitter and X over this week, do you think that was the degree of baseline interest in that like series and movie prior to this week? Or do you think like most of the people that were posting that stuff this is the first time they've ever really got exposed to that kind of content?
Yeah, I kind of ran a test on this inadvertently because I posted both a scene from Oppenheimer, Ghiblified. It got like 30,000 likes. And then I posted an actual picture from Spirited Away, a real still from the actual movie, 24 likes. And so there's a little bit
I love
of
it.
like,
I love the fact you're running experiments. That's fantastic.
yeah. And so there's a little bit of like, okay, it's not just the filter, it's this recontextualization. I thought a lot of it was like there's a reason we're using Studio Ghibli specifically, because there are other art styles that you can recreate with style transfer for a long time. But Studio Ghibli fits this like perfect, it doesn't quite go into the uncanny valley. And then if the AI, if you say, hey, I want you to recreate a picture of me, but use a Hollywood VFX pipeline to recreate the 3D model and then do exactly what they do in the Avengers and take it to the top level. It'll just look like a photo because VFX has now become photoreal. And so you can't go full photoreal or else it just doesn't look like a filter at all. And if you go to stick figure, it's unimpressive. And so you need this like perfect art style that looks clearly different, but still recognizable. And the level of alteration that happens in Studio Ghibli's animation style is that perfect intersection where it feels like impossible to just create with a vanilla style transfer or like edge detection and just pixel manipulation. You're not just recoloring. It's not a filter, but at the same time, it's not just, so it's so photoreal that it's just like, oh yeah, you took a picture of me like this and then it looks like this. And it's like, that's impressive, but it just looks like you took the photo like this. I don't know. That was my take.
Yeah.
Jordy,
I guess like, I just get, my own answer to that is like, I think it significantly increased the awareness of like this art style, this media.
Totally.
Like, I don't know by how much, but clearly like people are doing it who've never even like seen Spirited Away or heard of the director or like anything like that. And so I do think that there's really important, thing around the ease of use of the tools, actually gets people like, I think exposed and empowered to actually like do this stuff on a very mass scale and very rapidly. I think is the other thing we saw this week. The UX really matters for mass adoption on this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so I think I'm very excited to see it.
It comes back to the human creativity. Like we had basic like AI image generation for a while, and then we got the Harry Potter Balenciaga video, and that was clearly like AI generated, but the idea to combine Harry Potter and Balenciaga, which are these two very orthogonal concepts, like that creates the humor, and that came clearly from a human. And so I'm excited to see like where this goes to where I will see a Ghibli or Ghibli inspired video and be like, oh wow, this is like actually entertaining to me, not just a tech demo. Jordy, what was your take?
So I'm curious to get your take. So, if you were running an image, it was a bad week to be running an image generation model, because unless you're having your users prompt and get that quality of output that consistently, and there's just sort of like a distribution effect too, where like, I'm sure they're even just like the user base increased, dramatically just off of this one sort of meme cycle. Like, where would you, if you were running one of these sort of image generation models, where would you go? And do you think that some of these players should be thinking in a more weird way, like kind of trying to generate these new ideas versus making like sort of derivative foundation model efforts?
There's an interesting tie-in to things like ARC that we were talking about before and trying to assess capabilities and pushing new ideas forward, right? Like, this is steering the conversation a little differently from how you sort of framed it there. But like, one of the, risks of like a sort of frontier of AI that is sort of dogmatic in its view of scaling up is going to produce systems that end users are using that all look the same and have the exact same capability. And, our ARC shows is like, hey, there are still frontiers that are unsolved for. There are interesting things. Here's a benchmark that shows that you can kind of go measure against and actually, direct progress and inspire folks towards. That potentially could have like some sort of large step function change in capability of what these systems are actually able to do. You want like people, I think, pushing and exploring that frontier, and measures of benchmarks, I think, are actually good ways to help direct and guide research attention there. And I don't know the full details on how the new image generation from Aura works, but like at a high level, it does seem quite structurally different from the diffusion approach that even DALL-E 3 and a lot of other image generators are using. They're doing some sort of like tokenization like system, decoding system. They're like clearly have tried something new that like doesn't exist, that didn't exist before this week, that's allowing them to get these like frontier results. I think we want to see basically that mindset continue to get pushed across like the entire field, both on, you know, media, obviously, but also on the sort of reasoning and AI side. I think that's going to unlock a ton of use cases that people have sort of written off AI for today. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I think I know what AI can do and can't do. And, you know, now I'm comfortable in my sort of, you know, what my job or, you know, the things I'm going to ask it to do. I think there's still a lot that we want it to do that it can't yet. And things like ARC are hopefully useful measures towards those tasks.
Yeah, my reaction was just generally like, if you have $100 million in a bank and you were in the bank and you were trying to do what OpenAI is now doing, like remarkably better than you are doing, then like maybe you need to focus on like, you know, true innovation and trying to create these sort of like novel approaches to do said thing. Otherwise, it may be difficult.
Or maybe
to
some
compete.
unique distribution or something.
Yeah,
We talked about the enterprise.
I had this hot take like a year ago. I was like, I think anyone who's like just doing model training at this point is like lighting money on fire. If you really want to make a unique difference, especially if you're a small startup like a founder, like you got to go take an orthogonal approach. You got to try something different than what everyone else is doing. That's the only way you're going to be able to potentially, like, I think, capture attention and provide a lot of new value to the world.
Yeah, wait, talk. I know we're probably over time, but like there's no capital constraints in early stage AI right now, right? And like with Zapier, like I think one of the number one reasons that I would like see you guys in headlines is like another story of like, oh, Zapier raised X, you know, single digit millions or whatever.
Yeah. You want to hear the funny quick quib on that? It was about $1 million back in 2012. We never spent the money. By the time we actually got the round closed, figured out who we wanted to hire, got the payroll started, like revenue had caught up. And so literally, I think you could trace every dollar we raised all the way to today.
And so there's sort of like, it's potentially a problem right now that people aren't forced to be hyper creative because they just are like, oh, well, we have $30 million. Like we might as well, like we're supposed to spend it. And like spending money to be innovative is different than like, you know, like being innovative because you are constrained on the capital side.
Yeah. I have a follow-up here. How should we be thinking about Gary Marcus these days? He wrote Deep Learning alone isn't getting us to human-like AI. He's been an advocate for symbol manipulation. He's been kind of on the outs in inner AI circles. Rich Sutton wrote the, you know, scale is all you need, the bitter lesson, of course. But we're in this weird scenario where like we've done the scaling, we're still bullish on scaling. We are going to build bigger data centers and do bigger training runs, but then we might also need new algorithms. So he's like kind of right. How do you interpret maybe not just his legacy, but just the puzzle of how scaling fits into all of this?
I generally think he's been more right than wrong. I think if you like just take a limited 5-year view on this from 2020 up until 2020, end of 2024, you know, I think it was a generally right, like he was making the right ideas. You know, I think one of the reasons I personally find things like ARC more useful is they provide a direct way to do sense finding on this stuff. I don't have to like rely on my trust of another individual or another human in order to make like statements or build my confidence or intuition or my personal model of the world based on like trusting someone else's analysis. I can just look at reality. ARC is a contact with reality mode. We can have AI systems that could go try to do this stuff, have humans try to do it and measure the difference and actually look. And like, I've always found that that's going straight to the truth is like a much faster way to get to the frontier of knowledge. If you really want to know what's true or not, you kind of just have to look for things like that measure it, as opposed to like, you know, relying on proxies like other folks. But yeah, I would say Marcus has generally been more right than wrong. And for what it's worth, I think actually the bitter lesson is somewhat under like, I think often gets misinterpreted, you know, makes a statement about search and learning as these general for methods of scaling. But Sutton also makes the key point in the paper that hey, like these are the thing that we are actually applying search and learning on top of is an architecture that was invented by a human in the first place. The core idea of the thing that we are scaling fundamentally came from a person, from a human, and that's still true today still. And I think that is very inspiring even in the current regime we find ourselves here in March 2025, where I think we actually do need some idea changes. I think we need some structural changes in terms of how the architecture, how the algorithms work here, in order to, you know, certainly beat something like ArcGIS-2 with a high degree of efficiency. And yeah, there's going to be a scaling component to it, but like, don't miss that. Like, yes, there's actually an idea component too that often gets like kind of brushed over.
Final question: who do you want to highlight that you feel like is doing important research in AI that's maybe underhyped, but and not super online, but you know, whether they're attacking ARC or just generally doing work? Because there's a lot of people that love the sort of hyper commercial approaches to AI, going and working at the labs, but it's totally valid if you just want to like do research somewhere and just like focus on that.
Probably a few individuals that I think are sort of doing really interesting work in and around program synthesis, which is a sort of a parallel AI paradigm to deep learning. I actually don't think either is sufficient. I think some merger of the two is what's necessary to get to AGI. Story for another day. But there's quite a few people that are sort of working in this alternative paradigm that are doing some interesting work. On Twitter, this is not, this person's extremely online, but Victor Talen's a really good follow on X and Twitter. Been working on this sort of alternative like system called HVM that does this like crazy like enumeration of program synthesis really quickly. There's a couple academics that I respect a lot. Josh Tenenbaum at MIT, Melanie Mitchell at the Santa Fe Institute are two folks who've been really deep in the ARC world and the program synthesis world for many years, and have sort of cultivated and stewarded some of the community over the last 5 years towards working towards new ideas. So I really do respect and appreciate those folks for that.
I have one last question and then we'll let you go. Would you recommend against learning to code? And do you think it's possible to try and build an ARC prize for programmers? A task that a novice or reasonable programmer could do that no AI could solve?
Yes. In fact, let me answer the second one first. ARC
Please.
is that challenge itself. So
Okay.
one thing that is somewhat maybe confusing is like we present the puzzles very visually for humans to take, right? They look like grids, you like draw on the pixels.
Mm-hmm.
When these challenges are presented to computers, it's not an actual image processing challenge at all. It's just a 2D list of numbers. It's a matrix of numbers that represent the input grid. It's just 0 to 9 for each number represents a color, and then you get an output matrix for the output. And your job as a programmer is to write a program that maps the input sequence to the output sequence. And that is absolutely a challenge that every programmer human today could do, because they'd be able to look at this, look at the pattern and say, okay, I'll just write the program that transforms this because I can figure out the rules because I'm like a smart, intelligent human. I have like the capability of adapting to problems that I haven't seen before. And this is actually a like program synthesis challenge. You literally are asking a human to write a program to solve it. And that's the same thing we're asking AI to do as well, is to produce a program that can solve it. And things like O3 are kind of unique because they're like language programs, right? They have this chain of thought. You can think of a chain of thought as like, a program in English that transforms the input to the output. But yeah, literally ARC is the second thing that you asked for there.
What about
on the first question, should you learn to code? I haven't I guess thought super deeply about this. My hot take is I guess, yes, you should still learn to code. Primarily because it gives you leverage over technology today. And yeah, I don't see that leverage over technology going away anytime soon, particularly if you want to work on the frontier of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, I sort of think that the arc of humanity's history has generally been to produce tools that give individual humans more leverage over the universe around us. And I still think code is that thing today. I think AI will probably eclipse it, but I don't think code is going to go away in that future.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for joining. This was a fantastic conversation. We'll have to
have you
back. I know that there's going to be more developments with ARC Prize 2. I want to stay abreast of them. So please come back when there's big news.
Thanks, guys. ArcPrize.org if people want to enter the contest.
Yeah, go check it out.
Cheers.
Have a great day.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
Bye.